Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our February 9th, 2022 work session. I would like to call the meeting to order. Our first item of business, we're going to skip that for right now, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lutz, and he's going to give us an update on some of our facilities and expansion projects, new construction, and all that good stuff.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Again, well, this will be a regular item on our agenda, both meetings. So, construction update. We have at Mayak Elementary, the demolition has begun. The primary building, also known as the kindergarten building, is no more. It took no time whatsoever, and it is demolished. Cafeteria demolition is going to begin this week. Matt, you want to talk a little bit about how are they going to do the cafeteria demo?
They have started inside right now. They are working on disconnecting piping, disconnecting wiring, separating the kitchen from the cafeteria itself. And they have windows out already today. And once they get all of the necessity stuff, the integral stuff separated, they're going to saw cut about a foot in front of the kitchen and then close it off with a wood wall. So they're going to surgically remove it, is the way they say it.
Okay, you might also mention, students are going to get their breakfast and lunch since the cafeteria is being torn down.
Yeah, so since the start of the year and into next year, we are serving everything from Mayak Middle School. Staff with Angela's crew has been amazing.
They have. I've gone in there and I praise them every time I go.
And Brandy and her crew, I'll tell you, they don't even want your help. You just mess up their routine.
That's right.
If you
Yeah,
try to help
you're in the way.
you're in the way, just get out. But they've got a whole routine down and everything's marked. And they get all their kids fed. And overall, I mean, it's just been minimal complaints. Everything's largely been positive. It's quite the challenge. And we're up to 680 students at Mayak Elementary now, and over 600 at Mayak Middle School. So that's a lot of meals to be served. So they're doing a great job. Mayak Middle School, perimeter fencing goes up this week. Construction zones are established. Matt, what else do you want to add?
Right now, that perimeter fencing stuff was preliminary. They pushed that back a little bit. It'd probably be next week, but they were out today marking utilities to install the project signs at both locations. So there's an advertisement sign out in front of both locations showing kind of a rendition of what the school is going to look like as a promotional thing.
Oh, good.
And the middle school is going to be, like this says, perimeter fencing, establishing construction zones, rerouting the fire lane in the back, rerouting some of the drainage, and then moving the modular classroom that's there over and up to use as a construction trailer for the project. So right now, that's all we have for that school.
Okay. So we were lucky enough to have Miss Balance recorded a time-lapse video. If you haven't seen this, it's pretty.
We're working
Doesn't
hard.
take long.
Yeah.
Yeah, the building was gone in just over a day,
Wow.
and they're hauling stuff off kind of meticulously right now. This pile of junk goes to the dump, and this pile of junk goes to the scrapyard.
Yesterday I was there and they had the crane or the
Yeah.
backhoe on top of the little heap. It was like,
Crushing it down, yeah.
All those little kids, they were just sitting there dreaming
Yeah.
that they could be them. That was a lot of fun. So we thank Ms. Bounce for capturing that. A couple more pictures. New construction, the unnamed North Elementary School off of Tulsa Creek Road. The RFQ was extended out until February 15th. Request for qualifications. Is there any further updates on that?
Nothing right now.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Why was that extended out?
The initial paperwork that they sent to me to look at the rough draft had the date of the 28th on it, but when they posted it, they evidently changed the date and pushed it out to give enough companies time to get their submissions in, because it takes a while. Their RFQ process is pretty strict as far as the details that they want and how they want it structured, so they wanted to give people time to do it right.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much for the update. Exciting news for the county, for the kids, for the teachers, staff, everyone concerned. We're going to move on to revision to policy 2118, student board members, our second reading. Dr. Lutz?
We just conducted our student board interviews, so we're well underway. The revisions that we looked at was the terms and when they would begin. In terms of secession, again, we had reduced from 4 to 2, and this just formalizes everything that we have taken place. Any questions on the board policy?
I just wanted to comment I just wanted to let a lot of our principals and people here know that it seemed like almost every single one of them today said one of the best parts about the school system is how the teachers really went above and beyond to accommodate them, communicate with them, talk to them, and I just thought that was a really great thing to say about all of you guys and what your staff is doing to reach these kids and these students, especially after the last 2 years that they've had. So I just wanted everyone to be aware that some of these 5 students were they said wonderful things about all their experiences.
All of them did.
Yeah, they did.
It's always a tough decision to make, because I want to say, okay, all of you are student board members, but we can't do that, of course. But one of the questions that I had presented to the student board member candidates was, if you could change one thing in the school system, what would it be? And they couldn't think of anything. I don't know if they were just being very kind or really couldn't think of anything, but they sat there for a few minutes and they were like, everything that is in place is working, and they were just very, very pleased with the education that they're all receiving through the system. Anyone else have anything to say? All right. Moving right along, our fall policy update, second reading of our remaining policies for 2021.
We are well and closer to spring than the fall at this point.
Yes.
We are finally pushing through these. So, first one was our curriculum development, and this again speaks to some of the language here is going to speak to the letters training that is required from the state. It doesn't explicitly say that, but this is what the language reads towards. On another note, outside of the policy component, when we bring forth the calendar, that letter for next year, the letters training will largely drive the calendar for us so that we can work with our staff to make this process as good as it possibly can be. But we'll bring that to you at a later date, but it thought it was appropriate to bring it up here.
Okay.
School assignment. Just spoke to, it still allows us to assign students to schools. It does not allow students, just because you apply to attend a certain school does not mean that you get to attend that school. And we're comfortable with this language. Any further questions here? And given the growth on our northern end, we wanted to proceed cautiously with this.
Yes.
And the community use of facilities, the language that we looked at was for profit. We were comfortable moving forward with this policy. Are there any questions on the community use of facilities policy?
Okay.
That's all.
That's all we have. And
So I had a question for Dr. Lutz. Can you fill us in or update us on what's going on with the accreditation process?
Yes, good timing on that. We are, Renee, I'm going to pass this over to you. Renee's working close, I've got it here, so she can jump in as well. Thanks, Dr. Durham, we got our process up and moving. The school and self-evaluation needs assessment is completed. I will send off the application by the end of the month. We originally were going to have it done in January, but I believe that we had a snow day and then had to cancel that meeting, and so we're just slightly behind. So it's going to go off on the 28th. DPI reviews 3 years' worth of the school performance data, and a site visit may be required. And then they'll submit its findings to the State Board of Education, and the board will make a determination. Now, we are initially applying for the high school accreditation. We thought this was a good first step, and then we can move forward with district accreditation in the future.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Durham, for getting this up and running.
So we should have a
Ms. Dowdy as
decision,
well.
oh, I'm sorry, but we should know by the end of this school year?
It doesn't tell you the timeline in the state process. I guess it depends on the number of folks and whether or not they require a site visit. So what they do is initially just review the data, see if they can make a determination there. If not, they'll come into a site visit where they meet with leadership, district staff, teachers in the building, students in the building to try to figure out if they can get a better picture, because numbers are numbers, and sometimes they don't tell the whole story. So there's no timeline. They do not release a timeline that says it will be 3 months from the receipt of this that you will know X, Y, or Z. So I'm assuming once we put that in and get a contact who will be working directly with us on that process, then we'll be able to better say, okay, DPI is saying it could be anywhere between 4 to 6 months that we would get notification.
So have we submitted anything to them?
We don't submit anything to them except the first stage of that is to submit what they call a request for review. And so that request for review is simply just a letter from the superintendent. It's a form that DPI has that says we're requesting this review for this school, basic demographic information. And then they contact us to take it on to the next steps.
Have we submitted that?
That's what will be done by the end of this month, by February 28th. Before that, they request that you do what they call a school needs assessment or a comprehensive needs assessment, basically where you rate yourselves and you tell them where you think you are, and then they'll review your data and feel like, does that match? Does it not match? Do they need more information? And so that part's now been completed. They're meeting with school improvement on Friday to review that self-assessment data. And then we will send off the form to DPI before the end of the month is what we said.
What do they base it on?
So it's 3 years worth of data to include your student performance. So they're looking at all your EOC scores. They're looking at your dropout rates, your graduation rates, math rigor, whether or not your kids are meeting math rigor. So all of the stuff that's in the school report card that we're used to them looking at is what they'll review as well. Nothing out of the ordinary.
Good, thank you.
It's also part of our strategic plan, so in our plan, it's the spring of 2023, but we're on target for that, moving it forward. That again, we use our strategic plan to guide everything we're doing, all of our principal meetings and cabinet, everything that we're doing, we refer back to that. We're not guessing, and accreditation has been a discussion for a long time, and we're excited to get this up and running.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Just in time.
Perfect timing.
Good afternoon. Welcome. Do you need a few minutes?
No, I'm up already.
Okay,
All right.
all
Let's do
right.
this.
I'm gonna turn it over to you.
All right,
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that. My name's Adam Saperik. In case you don't remember me, I'm the auditor. We picked up Currituck County Schools 3 years ago. This is our third year doing the audit. I'm here to present the results of the audit. You have been given a bound copy of financial statements. We also have a PDF available, as well as a 3-page letter addressed to the board. The board. Okay, all right. Well, then if you don't have copies, I sent copies. Yeah, I sent them 2 months ago. Okay, all right. Well, so,
Yeah.
we can.
Go ahead and move forward. Yvette's gonna try to get us copies, but don't let that,
Yeah, I can go over the numbers.
Okay.
We've issued these statements 3 months ago, really.
Okay.
They've been submitted to the LGC, they've been approved. Again, there's a PDF version that you can get emailed to you. There's also a 3-page letter addressed to the board, the board being the body that actually hires us to conduct the audit of management. That 3-page letter is full of information about whether or not you had any new accounting policies or principles, new GASBs to implement. There were none of those. Those have all been delayed until next year. We encountered no difficulties in the timing of our audit. We were still able to conduct our audit in the time frame outlined in the engagement letter and our scheduled weeks. We come on site twice, once in the spring to do the majority of our compliance testing, and then after year end in October to conduct the financial piece of our audit. So there was no problems conducting that audit, no disagreements with management on how to account for any new information or new programs, new federal funds, no unadjusted audit differences, so we don't have a schedule of differences of opinions on numbers, because again, we're hired to issue an opinion on the financial statements, and opinions can vary, and anytime there's a discussion or a difference in opinion that's not highlighted in the financial statements, we would put it in that letter, and there was none of that. The audit, again, went as planned,
okay.
so there's nothing of issue in that 3-page letter, and that's basically what it says.
Okay.
The financial statements are 75 pages long. They really are presenting really 2 financial statements. You have your government-wide statements, which add all of your funds together, lumps in the value of your buildings, lumps in the cost of the future liability for retired employees, the pension plan, the post-employment benefits for health insurance. Those financial statements include your small portion of that state liability. It's not your liability, it's the state's liability, but accounting standards require us to show your piece of it, your percentage of it. So you have what's called net position. So anytime you're reading through the statements and you see net position, that's really not the most important number. It's, in fact, you have a negative net position. That doesn't mean you are out of money, it just means that your pension liability exceeds the value of your buildings. And that's meaningless for management or for budgeting and for determining how well you can pay your bills. So again, I encourage anytime you read through these, when you read about net position, keep that in mind versus reading about fund balance. Mm-hmm. Fund balance is the most important numbers in these statements. And unfortunately, those don't begin on page 1. They really start at Exhibit 3 and 4. So in looking at the statements, to me, Exhibit 3 and Exhibit 4 are the most important pages. Those will be pages 13, 14, and 15. The first one being Exhibit 3, your balance sheet, which shows that your fund balance in your general fund, which is where you house the majority of your fund balance, you actually have 2 local funds, the general fund and the other special revenue fund. 10 years ago, those funds were combined and it was one number, but they were separated mostly for charter school calculations into the general fund, which is most of your just your county funds, and then anything else goes over to the other special revenue fund. We'll find a couple of state and federal programs in there, like NC Pre-K, Medicaid, as well as some non-restricted funding sources, like indirect cost, fees that you collect. Anything that's not from the county really goes into the other special revenue fund. So when you look at your local fund balance, you can really look at the general fund and the other special revenue fund combined, knowing that some of the other special revenue fund balance is restricted for specific state and federal purposes. And that fund balance is actually separated in those statements, showing you this money for Medicaid has to be used on Medicaid. but the money that you collect for indirect cost is really available. Unfortunately, it's not considered unassigned. You're only allowed to have one unassigned fund balance, and that is in the general fund. So you can't have an unassigned fund balance in the general fund and an unassigned fund balance in your other special revenue fund, but there is still fund balance available there. And again, it's separated out, but it's not called unassigned, it's called assigned for special revenues. So when I look at your general fund balance for June 30, 2021, it totaled $1,334,000. That's an increase of $530,000 from the prior year. Significant increase. Of the 17 audits that I personally work on, every district added money this year. And $530,000 is in line proportionately with your size. I've got districts with 1,200 ADM that added $200,000, and I've got districts with 40,000 students that added $10 million. So adding $530,000, I think, is really proportionate to your size. The reason you're able to add $530,000 of fund balance is because you received 2 new pots of money, federal dollars. The Education Stabilization Funds, which totaled $438,000, and the Coronavirus Relief Funds, which totaled $418,000. That's almost $900,000 of new money.
Yeah.
Now, that new money had to be spent on Corona, the cost of conducting school in a pandemic, but that does alleviate some of the costs you would have had to spend otherwise. There's also some cost savings related to running school in the pandemic with virtual learning, whether it be transportation costs, utility costs. Again, across the state, we're seeing increases in fund balance related to savings and because of receiving those federal funds. Those federal funds will expire. They're only good for a couple of years, and the cost of mediation, the cost of protection devices, even the cost of recruiting is going up. And so districts across the state are utilizing now to add fund balance for the future cost after the federal funds.
Do you know when that will expire?
It's various dates, but it's mainly 2023. And some of the funds go past that, but I think some of those are mostly geared towards maybe construction and other. So it's not. It phases out, and there's new money coming in all the time. There's another pot of money behind that. I'm not sure when that is set to expire, but that. So 2023 might be not the end all day, but it will expire 2023, 2024.
Now, do they have a deadline when you need to allocate that money in certain areas? I mean, you can't continue to just roll that over in your fund balance. You have to allocate it for specific.
So those are federal dollars. They do not go into fund balance. Those are use or lose it,
Okay.
and receive it after you've essentially spent
I
it. You
see.
write the check,
Okay,
then they give you
get
the money.
reimbursed. Okay.
So the fund balance you were able to set aside or increase is your funds that you can roll over as long as you want.
Okay.
There's no expiration date on your general fund balance. The allotments from the state and federal government, those do have limits, and you don't receive those beforehand.
Right.
You do have plans to spend that money, but those plans can be updated on an ongoing basis. A lot of districts have set up a plan, but then again, realizing that recruiting has become a very significant difficulty to deal with. They're reallocating some of those federal funds to bonuses or retention pay. So you do have the ability to update your plan for that money on an ongoing basis. You just have to get it approved by DPI. But yes, that's that money, the fund balance you have in general fund is really yours. You also have $900,000 of fund balance in the other special revenue fund. And I told you some of that was restricted for specific grants. But then but of that $903,000, $559,000 is really assigned fund balance, meaning it's unassigned, but it can't be called unassigned. It's assigned by being included in the other special revenue fund automatically creates that assignment. Again, you just can't have unassigned in 2 locations. So you really have available about 1.7 to 1.8 million dollars of unassigned fund balance that's not restricted.
Okay. All right.
That increase for the 900,000, it went up 458,000.
Yeah, that's helped us tremendously. You know, you hear a lot of people always talk about fund balance, and we always like to keep a large fund balance, but we didn't have that, and haven't had that in quite some time. So it's nice that that is building up some.
Yeah, the last 2 years, you know, using fund balance, even at 1.3, that's not a lot
No,
of
it's
money.
not.
When you look at a budget, $46.9 million
Right.
ran through this district last year. Now, a lot of that is state and federal,
Sure.
which again, it's renewed every year, but still, you know, 1.3 million, that's 2%,
Right.
2.5%, 3%.
On
of-
average, what is your recommendation for a school district to have in their fund balance?
I get this question asked all the time, and there is no right answer. It varies from district to district, how well you work with the county, how responsive the county is to funding needs. There's lots of variables. There's even variables on where in the state you're located. Being Currituck County Schools, you are percentage-wise more heavily funded locally than you are state, just
Right.
because of demographics. So that answer changes, and it's also up for debate as to whether we should look at the total of the 46 million, which is your total revenue, or should we look at the 11.8 million, which is your local revenue. So 1.3 million or 1.7 million over 11 million, that's 10% of your local budget, but 2% of your total budget. There is no guideline for government entities that actually tax and collect their own money. The recommendation is 7%. But that's because they're not relying on state and federal funds. But yeah, 7% on a taxing local government is considered a healthy fund balance.
Okay.
Well, the last couple of audits we've had, it's been brought to our attention that our fund balance was of concern.
Yes.
Yeah,
So I'm happy that it's up a little bit.
it's breathing room.
It's not a lot, but it's,
I've had districts that have gone from positions of adding fund balance to using fund balance to using a lot of fund balance. The fund balance steers like a battleship. It takes years to turn it. Now, you were helped in the current year because of these federal funds, but
Yeah.
the decisions that have to be made to go from using $300,000 of fund balance to just to break even are very hard decisions, very costly decisions. You have to say no to things, and
Right.
that takes time, and it takes years sometimes to go from using fund balance to actually adding fund balance. And it comes off way faster than it
yes,
goes on.
it does.
Just-
Like your personal checkbook.
Yeah, exactly, right, that's.
Like, where'd it
The
go?
finances at home, it happen in government too. So anytime, and that's why just a lot of districts are utilizing these savings, this opportunity to build that fund balance for the unknown. It almost, when you look at it in decades waves, there was the last big crisis, the 2008, and there was these ARA funds, right when districts were running out of money, pumped in with ARA funds, rebuilt it, and now 10 years later, we're in the same position. So there's ebbs and flows, and if you can get to where you've added some breathing room and can come out at the end of 2023 or 2024 breaking even, I think that's a win in my opinion. You also have $757,000 of fund balance in the capital outlay fund and $571,000 at the individual school level. So again, if you're looking at the statements now, page 13, Exhibit 3, that's that balance sheet. Just these are your governmental funds. Your state and federal funds, they do not carry fund balance because again, those funds are use it or lose it. And the fund balance numbers are there across the bottom. Any questions? The other restricted revenue column, the $336,000, that is the restricted fund balance that actually has to be used on specific state and federal dollars. So that's where I was talking about the breakdown between restricted and just assigned.
So we need to make sure, and I'm sure Susan is on top of it, that the funds that we have to allocate for different things is spent, in a timely manner so that we don't forfeit those.
Yeah,
funds.
a lot of those funds are Medicaid. They do carry over. You spend enough. So the Medicaid money has to be used for EC. You spend enough at EC to keep those dollars fresh. But yes, you have to be wary of what excess funds are available. And most directors know that they've got excess funds. And,
right.
But yes, they're tracking those restricted dollars. A lot of times those restricted dollars, those programs very rarely pay for themselves. They're partially locally funded anyway. It's really, a lot of it is timing. You might get a small grant that takes a couple of years to spend out. But the majority of it really is Medicaid dollars. And again, you're spending enough on EC every year that it washes. But you wouldn't want to build up a giant Medicaid fund balance. It would be beneficial to keep spending it on an ongoing basis, but there are requirements around maintenance of effort that you have to just be careful about. So, but yeah, that's finances on top of the Medicaid dollars.
And I do want to interject something, if that's okay. So for capital outlay, where it's got the $757,000 there, that's as of June 30th. But there's always carryover projects. There are projects that didn't get started or we were in the middle of them, so we have to move that money on July 1 to cover those projects. So what we really have is $144,000 in capital outlay fund balance.
So after page 13, page 14 is a real quick reconciliation. Just going to show this for informational purposes. This shows how your fund balance of $3,567,000 becomes a negative net position of $19 million. These are all the pieces that go into that net position. And they make up a significant portion of the financial statements because it's relevant financial data. It is in conformity with GAAP and GASB's, and finance has to have controls in place to monitor and track and account for even these dollars in between these two. But really for management, for the board, fund balance clearly is the most important. After that, Exhibit 4, page 15, is the income statement for those funds that we just talked about. And you can see across the top there, your revenues, that's where we got the $46.9 million. $29.4 million of that comes from the state, $2 million of that comes from the federal government, $11.7 million in the general fund, and then the other special revenue fund collects $1 million of revenue. $2.2 million in the capital outlay fund, and then your individual schools obviously collected less because of the pandemic, but they're $263,000 in revenues in that fund. One of the things to point out, the first column in the general fund, down towards the bottom, transfers to other funds, $246,000.
Right.
One of the difficulties of teaching in a pandemic is feeding in a pandemic, and your child nutrition fund has been struggling cash flow wise for several years. And so again, part of your fund balance needs are supporting shortfalls in child nutrition. So $246,000 was transferred from the general fund into the child nutrition fund. It wasn't really a transfer of cash, but they bought supplies and food and paid salaries for child nutrition. Child nutrition was almost broke. They had $11,000 in the bank. They have added funds this year, but it's a rough participation game trying to feed kids, get meals in front of kids during the pandemic. Everybody's eating for free, but it's still about getting participation up. So there was a $246,000 transfer included in that increase in fund balance. So you went from the $805,000, which is really, really low, to $1.3 million, which is not as low. And that's,
Not as bad.
Yeah, not exactly. Any questions about the income statements here? Again, $46.9 million collected and $45.7 million spent, along with some transfers to child nutrition. So, again, a very positive financial report for this year, and it really, I think needed to happen. And again, right in line with every district I work with. After that, we have some schedules, budget versus actual, noting your governmental funds that we just went through, but showing your budget versus actual. You have one more fund that is not a governmental fund on page 21, Exhibit 7, and this is your school food service fund. Now, this fund balance and net position are the same number. So the value of the buildings, or its equipment, child nutrition has equipment, the value of that equipment is on this balance sheet, as well as their portion of the pension and retirement benefits liability. So when you look 2/3 of the way down, under liabilities, there's a net pension liability and a net OPEB liability, $800,000. That's an $800,000 liability that is really a liability of the state, but is associated with your child nutrition employees and therefore has to be included on this balance sheet. So when we look at the financial health of a child nutrition fund, instead of looking at fund balance or net position, I like to look at cash. And so your cash, which is the very first number on page 21, is $133,000. That's up $122,000 from last year. You have $11,000 in the bank. That's not even enough to cash flow operations. So $133,000 in the bank, much better position, but that's by no means financially healthy. Because again, just making payroll, buying inventory to cash flow month by month, $11,000 is not enough. So $133,000, while not broke, that's pretty broke. So
It's not broke, but it's pretty broke.
Yeah.
Much better than last year.
But much better than last year.
Yeah, but we put money in there.
Yeah.
Right, I like that.
The state has us gauge your cash or they really have us looking at working capital as a percentage or as a number of months of operating expenditures. So when you have $1 million of operating expenses and $133,000 of cash, and looking at a 9-month operating cycle, you really only have 1 month's worth of cash. So that is a bare minimum, really, in the minds of DPI, because just for cash flowing monthly operations. The DPI has typically wanted you to operate between 1 and 3 months cash. You could not charge indirect cost if you had less than 1 month, but now you cannot charge indirect cost if you have less than 2 months. So in their minds, you should have at least 2 months of cash on hand, which would be $266,000.
Right.
So that, again, just to kind of gauge that broke, but not, not completely broke comment, you really are under where they want you to operate, which is in that 2 to 3 month range. And that's, again, just, it's a participation game. Part of being where you are, you have fewer kids that eat for free in a normal year. And so that's less revenue, less meals to sell, less federal reimbursements. Now all kids eat for free, but you still have a significant portion of your student population that's used to bringing their own food. And so while the federal reimbursement rate is higher now during the pandemic, unless you have the right participation, it's very difficult to make money.
Okay.
After that is a cash flow statement for that fund, followed by pages and pages of footnotes that outline all of your assets, liabilities, all of your accounting policies, roll forwards of fixed assets, 10 pages of the actuarial calculations used to calculate the pension and OPEB liabilities, and also several schedules related to those pension and OPEB liabilities. Since these have been implemented over the last few years, there's 6 pages of building a 10-year schedule just showing your portion of the pension liability and the OPEB liabilities. There is one number that I like to point out in these schedules. If we look at page 52, so salaries is the largest expenditure of a school district, and this schedule has a line for your covered payroll. Now that's just the wages subject to retirement, the covered payroll, doesn't include non-covered employees, but it's still a good number to see a history. These statements aren't comparative. They're not built to be that way. They're not supposed to be. But here's a schedule that shows you a little bit of the past, and you can see your salaries for this year: 25.3 million, 2014, 20.2 million. So an increase of $5 million over the last 8 years. That is part of the fund balance usage, as well as for every dollar of covered payroll, you're looking at FICA, retirement benefits. The retirement rate is over like 30%. Now, if you have state employees paid by the state fund, state public school fund, those benefits are covered. But you being a higher locally funded district, you have to fund those. So an individual who was being paid in 2014 by the local fund, you had to put in 8.69% of their dollars into the pension plan. Now you're putting 14.78. That's double, almost double. So locally funded districts, or higher proportion locally funded districts, run into problems when it comes to the continuously increasing benefits. And that's, this schedule kind of shows that. So, after the footnotes, after the schedules, there's also some detailed, more detailed schedules, again, of those same governmental funds, general funds, just broken out and really all on one page or 2 pages. Like, so page 58 and 59 is that income statement for the general fund, but again, just more detailed and bigger. After all those schedules, starting on page 62, this is the compliance portion of the audit. So I told you we come twice. You have a financial audit, which kind of makes up the first 60 pages, and the back 15 pages are the reports related to your compliance with state and federal spending requirements on your major programs. So every year we have to audit 20% of your federal dollars, and every program has to be audited once every 3 years. We have to audit 40% of your state dollars, but we have to audit the state public school fund every year, which is like 90% of your state dollars. So we're auditing almost 95% of your state dollars every year just by picking up the state public school fund. But we're in the compliance portion where, again, we're making sure that those dollars are spent in accordance with those plans. This year, the federal programs that we audited as major were the special ed cluster and the Education Stabilization Fund, the COVID-19 funds. Page 62 starts the first of 3 letters, 2 pages each. The first letter is on internal controls over financial reporting and over compliance. The next 2 letters are over whether we believe you comply with the federal and state requirements for each of your state funds and federal major funds that we audit for compliance. These three are all clean, unmodified opinions. Basically, we believe you comply in all material respects with the requirements of the State Public School Fund, the EC funds, and the COVID Education Stabilization Funds. And we noted no deficiencies in internal controls over your financial reporting. So again, these are considered clean, unmodified opinions. Last year, we did have a finding on your federal funds, Title I, time and effort reporting. That has been cleared. There was no time and effort reporting exceptions found in the current year testing of EC. So again, really a clean compliance report and the correction of last year's findings.
Any questions concerning the reports and the budget and?
I don't suppose you have to give recommendations.
No, well, for your size district, you have an excellent accounting team. You've got some long-standing people in finance. Districts of certain sizes have difficulties segregating duties and building internal controls around just a few employees. So your breakdown in your finance department, several AP, several payroll, the fact that you have an assistant finance officer and a finance officer position really, I think, help, again, segregate duties and allow for a clean audit report. The recommendations outside of this report, we talk with management all the time about how to handle things, what can be done better, but nothing of concern in the overall set of controls over these statements and over financial reporting in general. So.
That's great. Yeah. That sounds good to me. Dr. Luke, you have any questions? Or okay, well, thank you for being here today and explaining some things to us. It's a bit overwhelming when you look at the numbers and then you look at the fund balance and that small percentage. It's a little bit scary, but
the audit takes hundreds of hours, and this is my favorite part. And I show up early. I was supposed to be 20 minutes early, and so I apologize. But this really is my favorite part. It's finally getting to look. It's a puzzle.
Yeah.
It really is a puzzle.
Put it all together.
Put it all together and show you and show you what I think is most important and what good or bad information. Presenting it to you. So, I enjoy having this district as a client. I enjoy auditing and presenting, and I really do. I think you have a good audit report here. Positive fund balance, no question cost, no findings. I think keeping up the good work is, I think, the key. And my number is at there's a letter, the first opinion letter. My number's there. Finance has my number. I'm happy to talk about finances and financial statements whenever. We work on school board audits year-round, so we're always in school board audit mode. And really these, again, it is the set puzzle at the end of the audit. And I appreciate everybody in finance's work to prepare for us. We send request list probably totaling 200 requests for documents and items, and that's just, and that doesn't even count the fact that I'm not counting the fact that we look at 85 payroll checks. That's a one. 100 different invoices. So it's a time-consuming, heavy burden on management to prepare for us, and I appreciate the team you have in that department, all working and very knowledgeable to helping us get through this.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your hard work. Appreciate that. All right, anyone else have anything they'd like to bring up or discuss? Okay, at this time, I would like to close the work session. Y'all have a great evening, and thank you for being here.